all, congratulations on your new role as chairwoman of the Healers Circle. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Do you want to just start by introducing yourself and maybe talking a little bit about why you took that role?
Sure. So my name is Jennifer Rollin. I'm an eating disorder therapist, writer, and speaker in private practice in Rockville, Maryland. And I took the role as chair of the Healers Circle because I actually had a client when I was just starting in my private practice that saw me through Project Heal. And it was just such an incredible experience. And Project Heal, without going into too much confidential information, they really went to bat for her and made sure, like, when she needed to go to a higher level of care, it helped with that. So I was just like, I need to, like, get more involved with this amazing organization, basically.
That's awesome. What do you do outside of your role here at Project Heal? Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on your own practice, on your extra? I know you have a lot of online trainings. It'd be great to hear a little bit more about those.
Sure. So I am a therapist full-time in private practice in Rockville, and I see all people with eating disorders and, some comorbid mental health conditions that come along with that. I also write for a few different places and do some speaking as well. And then lately, my newest thing, which you mentioned, has been creating different eating disorder on-demand online trainings. So those, I have some for professionals, body image, and working with clients with bulimia and binge eating disorder. One is upcoming on anorexia. And then, and then I do some for those in recovery, and they come with workbooks so that they can really start to integrate the tools and skills that I talk about in the trainings.
What made you want to develop those? Like, what made you feel like your therapy wasn't maybe enough or doing as much as you wanted to do?
Yeah, so I love working with people with eating disorders. It's my passion, yet I also am very out there on social media. So I have a professional Instagram account and Twitter and Facebook, and I get people all over the world reaching out with questions and comments and whatnot. And I also know, so I wanted to be able to provide something that people, if they couldn't work with me, they could still learn, or if they didn't have a specialist in their area, they could at least get some basic information and learn some different strategies that I explain to my clients. And then also, when we go to school as therapists, the vast majority of us get little to no eating disorder training. So I know that that training is so important, and so that's why I created trainings for professionals as well, so that they can.
So cool. Wow. How did you get into this field in the first place? What inspired you?
Sure. So I had my own eating disorder, which I think was the real inspiration, obviously, behind being an eating disorder therapist. Before that, I always knew I wanted to be a therapist. I just never thought I would be an eating disorder therapist at all, because I didn't know anything about eating disorders until, I treated my first clients with them, and I had my own history of it. But now that is I'm not the only, there's other issues I like working with, but my real passion is working with eating disorders at this point. So yeah, basically I knew I always wanted to help people and give back, but then kind of through my own life experiences and overcoming them, I realized, I wanted to make a difference in other people's lives.
So you've worked in this field for a while now. What do you see are some of the biggest misconceptions either about this field or maybe some issues with it, things that you could see needing to be changed in the future?
Yeah, I have a lot, so I'll try to keep this short.
Take as long as you want.
But some of the biggest misconceptions are, one, the vast amount of weight stigma in the eating disorder treatment community. So there's a lot of providers saying things, and to be honest, I heard this in my own treatment, don't worry, we won't let you get fat. I don't let any of my clients become obese. So providers making fat-phobic comments that keep people stuck in their eating disorder, because when we fear the same thing that our clients fear, we're setting them up. I think also providers who are not using evidence-based treatments. So there are certain treatments that we know are effective for people with eating disorders. And, for instance, for somebody with anorexia, it's not helpful to sit there and just talk about their childhood and their past for all the time, because you eventually need to address the food. And if they're underweight, the weight restoration, because they can't do insight-oriented work and it's not really going to help them. basically my philosophy is that why people got sick is interesting. Like, it's helpful to know. I'm not interested in it, but nobody's like, oh, okay, I realized like I felt, I was bullied as a kid. I felt insecure, and now I can eat normally and I'm recovered. Like, it doesn't work that way. It's, you really have to be, and that's why I eat with people in session. You really have to be like in the trenches working on the behaviors while addressing like the function of it, like the eating disorder in their life. So it's like about the food and not about the food at the same time.
That's super cool. And I've never heard of therapists eating with their clients before, or I haven't heard that as like a super common thing.
It's crazy to me. Like, I was talking to an eating disorder dietitian the other day, and she seemed so shocked. And I'm not sure she eats with her clients. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because it just really brings the issues like to the forefront. Like, tomorrow I'm doing a challenge meal for lunch with a client, followed by donuts with a client right after. So
awesome.
We do a lot of challenges.
Kind of along the same lines of issues in the field, obviously Project HEAL works a lot to address insurance issues, either with insurance not covering or not covering it long enough. So partners of Project HEAL treat to outcome, which means obviously they don't discontinue treatment until the patient's recovered. Could you just speak a little bit to why you think that's important?
Yeah, I think that's super important because insurance is a huge issue. Obviously, there's so many issues within the eating disorder treatment field with people getting denied access to care because they're not at a certain BMI. There's so many problems with it. And I think it's really important that we are treating people until they are recovered, not just saying some arbitrary cutoff like, oh, your weight restored, or oh, you're doing behaviors X amount of times, like you're fine, because we don't want to leave like even 10% of an eating disorder. It's kind of like saying, let me have like 10% of this illness, like this virus, don't get rid of that. And then eventually when life stressors come up, it's going to come back with full force. So I think we really need to make sure like we're treating people until they are recovered when we can.
Very cool. Kind of switching gears a little bit, there have been some shifts, I feel like maybe in the last several years, last decade or so, with movements like health at every size. I was just curious to see what your thoughts were on that, if you are a supporter of it, if you see issues with it, anything you have to say about it would be great.
That's a great question. So I am a huge health at every size proponent. Like, I have started a health at every size professionals group on Facebook, which now has over 1,000 members, and a health at every size in the eating disorder recovery group for those in recovery that has now over 1,000 members. So I'm very passionate about health at every size. I think it goes back to what I was talking about with weight stigma and eating disorder treatment. And I believe if you're not health at every size informed, that you're not providing ethical care for your clients, because if you have your own bias against people in larger bodies, how are you supposed to help people who, I just got back from my last session dealing with a client with internalized fat phobia who's talking about how with an eating disorder, how she's judging everybody, it doesn't matter what their bodies look like, but especially people in higher weight bodies, like that's her eating disorder's biggest fear. And if that's the provider's fear too, it's like trying to treat someone with a phobia of snakes when you're phobic of snakes. It doesn't work.
That's so accurate. Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Do you see any potential problems with health at every size, or changes you would maybe suggest for it? Anything?
Yeah, I don't see, again, I love health at every size. I think the only potential issue is that the health word is very triggering. And I think even people within the health at every size movement have looked at like different ways, like saying body liberation movement or fat acceptance movement, because we know that health is a very loaded word for people in general, but particularly people in eating disorder recovery, because that can turn into orthorexia. That can turn into, if somebody has a chronic illness, they might never be healthy.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure we're not placing an emphasis on like health as a barometer of someone's worth. Aside from that, I am very much in love with the health at every size movement.
Switching kind of more back to your job, what do you view, or what do you think is the most rewarding part of your job?
I think the most rewarding part is just seeing like that moment when the light comes back in someone's eyes, when they've been, because there's just such a distinct difference when somebody is so deep in an eating disorder and you can tell that their brain space is totally taken up. And then I'd have moments with clients that just like give me goosebumps. Like I think I even like typed out a quote a client was saying. We were doing a session virtually, and I was like, can I write that down? Because that was beautiful this week. And it was something, I'm going to butcher it, but it was something along the lines of like, I just felt so free this week, and I was able to actually like enjoy eating and food. And just like when you have that moment where a client is saying that like they have so much mental freedom now and clarity, and their personality is just back, like that I think is the most rewarding piece for me.
That's awesome. What about the most challenging?
Yeah, so I think this work is definitely challenging, which I actually like to be challenged. I actually really enjoy working with complex cases and people who are really deep in their eating disorders. But I would say one challenge, I'll maybe name two, is hearing people's abusive thoughts towards themselves and just seeing how inaccurate. It's like you almost, and I've said this to clients before, I'm like, if a friend said this to you, you would probably like want to shake them because it would be so frustrating because you're like, here's this fabulous, amazing person in front of me and they think they're horrific. So sometimes, you know, hearing the level of like abusive thoughts can be challenging, but it's nice, you know, as people are able to come out of that. I think another challenging thing is sometimes when clients like to show up occasionally for lunch sessions and trying not to eat lunch. But I'm kind of I'm going to try not to curse. I don't know another way to say this. I'm a bit of a hard ass. I'm just going to say that. So I've been known, like with more resistant clients, to literally stand in front of them with food like outstretched in my hand. Wow. And my track record is actually quite good.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that that's my treatment approach. But, you know, it's just sometimes clients, it's interesting. It's like there's that part of them, the eating disorder part, that is like terrified and is like, I do not want to eat this. I don't want to do it. But then it's like you see often there's this healthy side that's actually like happy that, and it's kind of like that I'm pushing them. It's like a client had been very not happy with me in session because I had her do like a challenge snack with me. It was like donuts or something. And then texted me later and was like, thank you. Like, I really appreciate that you did that with me.
For the kind of more the general public, what do you wish people understood about eating disorders that you think they don't?
I wish people understood that eating disorders aren't a choice and they're not just like a thin, emaciated Caucasian girl who's superficial and just a diet gone too far, that these are devastating mental illnesses that nobody would choose to have. They're not just like somebody being vain. And I think if you haven't struggled with one, you haven't known somebody, it can be difficult to understand that it really is just like a mental illness in your head that's telling you all of this stuff. I think also that you cannot tell how sick somebody is based on their physical appearance or based on their weight. Because I have so many clients who, the vast majority of my clients, you would have no idea that they were sick if you saw them on the street. And people will even say that to some people's face, essentially. And I think we need to start to shatter the stigma that you can tell who has an eating disorder based on what they look like, because they don't discriminate. They impact people of all genders and races and socioeconomic statuses and weights. So I think those would be like the two biggest things.
Yeah, I've seen that also. Just to wrap up, do you have any favorite piece of wisdom that either you have received or that you like to share with patients who are struggling?
Sure. So, I mean, there's a lot of things. It really depends on the circumstance, but just thinking off the top of my head, some of my, I guess my favorite piece would be just, first off, I have this exercise I'll do sometimes with clients. It's like a DBT pro-con chart. So basically I did one with someone this week. It was like I had her write the pros and cons of staying in her eating disorder, and we listed them all out. And then we wrote next to each one whether it was short-term or long-term. And at the end, it was actually really interesting. It was like there were maybe like 3 pros, and they were all short-term, and there were like 15 cons, and the majority of them were long-term. And of those cons, one of them was reduced life experiences, which really stuck with me. So basically, I would say, long story short, that your eating disorder serves a function in your life or it wouldn't be there. And so what we can start to do in therapy is look at, what is the function of those behaviors and how can you get those needs met in other ways. And that ultimately, another thing is you can always go back to your eating disorder. Like, I understand recovery is scary. Your eating disorder is always there. Like, you know how to do that, but why not take a chance and try something different?
I love that. That's great. Is there anything else you would want our followers, other providers to know either about your practice, about your work in this field in general?
I think that's pretty much it, but that they're welcome to connect with me if they want via my website. It's www.jennifer, Rollin, like on the river, ROLLIN.com. Yeah, and I love connecting with people and answering any questions or anything like that. So
cool. Thank you so much.